So it's a bit of an awkward situation. So I have some people attending in the room and some people online. So it's a mix and match. Okay. We've all managed to get through the CTG teaching. Last group, or almost last group, was last week. Is that correct? Okay. So we've talked about the basic physiology. We've talked about hypoxia and the physiology of hypoxia and how to manage hypoxia along the way. We've now trying to let's apply this properly to special circumstances. So we know how to manage most cases at the moment. Yes. But the whole plan is to try and tailor the management as much as we can to special babies. Okay. And we're going to start talking by clinical situation. Okay. Today's talk is mostly about meconium, and we'll understand why in a moment. Basic principle once again, why do we monitor the baby? The idea is regular assessment of fetal status. We need to make sure that baby is fine and mom is fine at all times. Okay. We need to make sure that when the baby is becoming hypoxic, we realize that it is and intervene in a timely fashion. If we need to assess, we can assess further. If we need to actually make baby better, then we have the chance or deliver. Exactly equally the same. We need to make sure that we're not harming moms when we don't need to. So I am gonna skip this and talk about, okay, basic principles of the monitoring. We always start with a risk assessment. Every lady that's coming to us, we're gonna take a general history. We always do a brief SBAR on the handover. Then we're walking outside to the room and making sure that we are aware of all the history that is ongoing. What's the medical situation? How is the lady's labor been? Before we're actually going into the room. That's always the situation. And the idea is we're trying to make a risk assessment to see what risk factors can we identify and what exactly are we looking for this specific baby. If we know what we're looking for, we're more likely to actually find it. Okay? So if we have a special situation, and in today's talk is going to be about meconium, we always have to ask ourselves, okay, why is this there? Why is this clinical situation happening as it is at this point? Okay, what has led to this point? Okay, what can this lead to further? So what's the next step of the situation or the process of whatever's happening at the moment, and how can I make this better? Okay, can it be treated? Can it be improved? And if I am trying to treat, what are the signs of improvement? Okay, it sounds very basic, sounds very simple, but actually we don't always think like that, and that's a big problem. Okay, we also need to figure out what are the signs of deterioration. So if this baby is getting worse, what do I expect? And we said we're going to start off with meconium, and the reason I'm starting with meconium is because this is a very special circumstance in my own journey. When we started doing physiology in Lewisham, that was back in 2014, we saw an improvement in everything except for meconium aspiration. That rate actually doubled. Okay? And we had more and more unwell babies that were becoming really unwell because of meconium. And the reason was we didn't think that way, even though it feels very simple. You're looking at the situation, you're trying to treat it. B, we didn't really understand it. Okay? And we were just focusing on something entirely different, which was the physiology of the hypoxia. But meconium is not necessarily the same as hypoxia, is it? Meconium is not always associated with hypoxia. It can happen on its own. Let's start from the very, very beginning. Meconium, that green stuff in the log core, yeah? What's meconium? Baby spoon? Yeah. Okay. What is it made of? Okay. Yes, that's why it's green. So bio. It is sterile, so it has no bacteria. But what is in it? So that's what's not in it. But what is in it? Mucus. Okay. Okay. Cells from the bowel.
Cells from the body.
Yeah. Baby's hair. Baby's digestive enzymes. Okay. And even skin cells. So this is whatever baby's eating or ingesting. Okay. Digesting and letting out. Okay. And obviously contains lots and lots of light. Okay. So that's what meconium is. Remember what we said? So why are we in this situation? Why do babies pass meconium? Why is the baby pass meconium? Okay. So they pass it because they can. Okay. So it's more common in babies that are term, so they're mature enough, as you correctly said. Okay. And in second stage, when there's head compression, as the baby's literally coming out, that intense head vagal stimulation, okay, can lead to meconium being passed out. So as you correctly said, it can also happen with hypoxia. Okay. What about preterms? Do they pass meconium frequently?
They shouldn't.
They shouldn't. Why shouldn't they? They're human beings. They're allowed to poop.
Because their gut is not mature, there's no stress, there's no contractions, and it's antenatal period. So ideally, people will be passing it in
That's not normal. So preterms don't usually pass meconium, but it can be seen in things that can stimulate the gut again. So we said that babies pass meconium naturally if there's increased pressure on the head. What if there's intraventricular hemorrhage? That's basically increased pressure on the brain, no? So intraventricular hemorrhage, they can pass meconium. Babies that have diarrhea, so their bowels basically being forced to work because they have an infection. Okay. We always talk about listeria. How many of us have actually seen listeria diarrhea in babies? How many have you seen? Okay. I've seen none. Okay. I mean, I've heard about it. I've heard colleagues saying that they've seen listeria. They've isolated listeria from meconium, but I've never actually seen it. The reality is, but I've seen meconium in preterms. I mean, remember, there's always other sources of infection. So babies can get stressed because of smoking, and babies that have prolonged strom. Okay, so they've ruptured their membranes for a long while. That's an infection. There's bacteria coming in. It's not necessarily just the listeria that causes diarrhea. Whatever they're ingesting, if it is septic, lactose is normally aseptic, but if it is septic, it can cause diarrhea. It can pass meconium. And obviously, if mom is a smoker, that can lead to chronic hypoxia. Yeah. Okay. So that's why it's happened. What can it cause? So what? Babies pass meconium. So what? So babies can aspirate. So everybody's thinking about meconium aspiration syndrome. Yeah. What else can it cause? Is there somebody not able to log in? Somebody's struggling to log in? I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's the codes. As easy as it gets. Yeah. Hi, boss. So we said that complications, meconium aspiration, infection. Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Meconium aspiration or meconium in the library.
Oh, they're in the other room.
That's part of meconium aspiration. Remember, there was a hypoxia that was causing the meconium to pass in the first place. Okay? That can still cause problems. Okay? So don't forget about that. Seeing meconium, you always need to think about, okay, what about? Can this be a hypoxia? Yeah. Yeah. Because if it passed at some point, because you're starting labor with meconium there, okay, it may be because it's mature, but also may also be because of chronic hypoxia that's been happening for the last few weeks. So always keep that in mind. Any questions? Is that a question? It's just sound. Okay. let's talk about meconium aspiration, because that's what scares everyone. And that's the pitfall that we fell in when we started physiology. Yeah. Now, let's agree something very important. If we see meconium in the liquor, this meconium is already in baby's lungs. That means we failed our mission before we ever started. Okay, well, meconium is already there, so I can't prevent meconium aspiration. We'll stop. Let's just end the session there. But if you saw the curve at the beginning, we actually managed to get it better, and that's about understanding it. So the idea is, obviously, if the baby breach, it doesn't stop. The only situation when the baby doesn't have meconium when you see it outside is when it's breach. It's pulling to the outside world straight away. Okay, but babies can actually digest and break down small amounts of meconium within its lungs. That's not a problem. Okay, it's the big chunks that cause the problems. Okay. And if there's, especially if it's dense, if it's large amounts, that's going to cause more problems to the lungs. First part is airway obstruction, because that's what we're always thinking about. When we think about meconium, we think there's something blocking the baby's lungs. Airway obstruction can be in one of many ways. Maybe complete, so that baby's lungs is completely obstructed, in which case baby gets delivered and it can't actually inflate the lungs at all, or whatever that portion remains collapsed because it never inflated. Okay. Or it inflates at the beginning, pushes a bit of meconium through, and then as the baby is trying to push it, breathe out again, it blocks, and then that area gets blocked off and ends up with the air being absorbed and ends up with atelectasis. Okay. Finally, it can be by partial compression, obstruction, which means that the meconium is acting like a ball valve effect, and it's hyperinflating the lungs. So rather than baby's lungs being collapsed, they're actually hyperinflated. It ends up with emphysema. And eventually, baby's lungs can actually start popping. And you end up with doing x-rays and there's ground glass appearance of the lungs. Okay. But that ground glass appearance is not just about emphysema and the lungs popping. It's also about, remember, this meconium is not, yes, it's aseptic, but it's not inert. It contains bile and it contains digestive enzymes. What are digestive enzymes doing in our gut? They're breaking down all sorts of proteins. Yeah? So what do you think it's going to do to the baby's lungs? It's going to completely break it down. Yeah? And obviously there's bile acid there, and there's supposed to be a surfactant layer, which is a lipophilic, hydrophilic, so it's the layer that helps the lung not sticking together, and we've just put soap in it. Fine. What's that going to do to it? So the surfactant is going to break down. It's going to stick together, and the lungs will not inflate. Not just about obstruction. So meconium is not just about the mechanical obstruction. Yes, mechanical obstruction is important, but digestive enzymes and bile are also damaging. Okay. So that's the aspiration part of it. What about choriamnionitis? I thought you said that meconium is aseptic, so why would baby develop infection? Why? Because it changes the pH. No, we were talking about choriamnionitis, proper infection. And we said that the meconium is aseptic. So why would baby develop an infection if meconium is aseptic? So, not just about changing pH. So the liquor has antiseptic properties. The liquor has neutrophils, etc., that go in, and whatever bacteria that tries to enter, it breaks it down. It attacks it. But the meconium attacks those neutrophils. It actually stops the phagocytosis process. So basically, you have stopped the anti-inflammatory process, or the immune system that's working around the baby, and you have provided lots and lots of rich nutrients, which is the meconium, the digestive proteins, etc., for the bacteria to grow upon. So it's not just about changing pH, it's about changing the environment, reducing the immunity or the antiseptic properties of the liquor, and providing nourishment for the bacteria. Okay. And remember, there's always, or there might have been a hypoxia that caused this in the beginning, be it chronic or being gradually evolving. Okay. Okay, so now I've seen a lady that has meconium. I've thought about why she has meconium. I've thought about, okay, these are the risks that are involved. What do I need to look for? I said that I wouldn't recognize the complication unless I know what I'm looking for. So what should I be looking for in this lady? Okay. So you're talking about why this has happened. We've already looked at why it's happened.
Oh, okay.
Now that I'm caring for her, now she's on my labor ward, what signs do I need to look for the complications that we've said? We said we're looking for 3 main complications, yes? We said we're looking for meconium aspiration, choriamnionitis, and the hypoxia. So first, what causes the meconium? We've already determined that. And we're going to look at whether it's physiological or pathological. And then events that increase the risk of meconium aspiration. So we don't really know what causes meconium aspiration. We think we do, or we think we have the process. We think that baby takes deep breaths when it's born because of the prolonged episode of hypoxia that it goes through. So once it's born, baby's happy and fine. At cesarean sections, most babies take the first breath and soon later they start crying. But most babies at cesarean section breathe a little or cry a little bit later than those delivered by vaginal deliveries. Yes, have you noticed that? They don't always cry straight away, even though they take their first breath soon because of the cold. So once they are exposed to the cold, they breathe. But what actually makes them properly cry and take proper deep breaths? The hypoxia. So when the cord is clamped, that's when they really need to rely on their lungs to breathe. Okay? So if the baby is going through recurring episodes of cord compression, doesn't know whether it's born or not. Babies don't actually know exactly when labor happens, what's happening throughout labor. They're not aware of what's happening. All they feel is a bit of squeezing, a bit of hypoxia, and then light comes. They really don't know what's going on. But if they have a prolonged episode of cord compression, they think, okay, maybe I've been born. Deep breath in, lots and lots of meconium and liquor. Actually, no, I haven't been born yet. And they try and push whatever's in out. But what's going to come out is only the light liquor, leaving the thick meconium inside. Do this a couple of times and the lung is now full of thick meconium. So if I'm looking at the trace, what I need to look at is the wide, deep decelerations. But that's basically meaning intense cord compression that's lasting for a long time, basically telling the baby that it's being born. Okay?
Vanessa says they can't hear us, so if we ask a question, we have to repeat it.
Okay. Sorry, I'll try.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So that's how we try and figure out whether meconium aspiration is happening or about to happen. Yeah? What about choriamnionitis? Well, more importantly, subclinical choriamnionitis. What do we look for?
Clinical signs.
Of what?
Sorry, I didn't understand whether we are
So
asking
what signs would we look
CTG.
for if we're trying to diagnose choriamnionitis?
Baseline going high.
So what people used to say in the past is uncomplicated tachycardia, yeah? A gradual rise in baseline, not preceded by anything else, not preceded by deceleration. What if it's preceded by deceleration? Does that mean it's completely not? Does that exclude choriamnitis, the fact that you have deceleration?
It doesn't exclude it. It's choriamnionitis.
It can be both. But
Take out all the stresses and it's still high.
yes. But the whole point is recognizing that how to diagnose choriamnitis early. Because if you have the risk factor and you can see that the baseline is going up, then you already have your answer, or you're getting there soon. Yeah. So, how do we manage meconium stained liquor? How are we going to monitor this baby? How are we going to diagnose it first? That's easier. You see green in the liquor.
We know there is meconium on the other.
Yeah, you see green in the liquor. The lady tells you. You don't actually need to diagnose it, do you?
Yeah, the lady diagnoses it.
Yeah.
And then we will continuously to do monitoring.
What about thin and thick? Does it make a difference?
Yeah, as you said, big chunks can go. No, but Meconium is Meconium. It's already, yes, I don't know if it's doing anything.
Even taking this out.
Are you? I thought so. National guidelines say you can actually do intermittent hospitalization. You can send them to the birth center to leave them at home. Yeah. Why don't we do that here? So we do that here because of very good reason. So why do we treat all meconium the same? Why don't we follow everybody else and say this is thin, this is thick, and I thought you just seen that it's thin.
Yeah, but you might not see
But the bun is up. The bottom is up.
So the bottom is up. So yes, very, very true. So meconium is meconium, but we know that we've already seen that thin green stuff. It's already in baby's lungs. The reason we're trying to make thin meconium more physiological, if we can make it, is because obviously we know that the thin meconium is not usually harmful. Babies cope with that, and it's not a big problem. But the reality, as you correctly said, the bottom is up. What the thin meconium that has passed from the lower part or the forewaters is now out of the way. Whatever baby's pooing behind there, I can't see. Where is baby aspirating from? Is it aspirating from the larva that's gone or the one that's behind? From the one that's
From
behind.
behind.
Okay. Now remember, the baby that has passed meconium because it is mature enough to do so is the baby that can easily go to the toilet again, can pass more and more meconium. Rather than the baby that was never ready to pass meconium to start with, that baby's not going to pass that much meconium. Does that make sense? So if you stress that baby out a little bit further, it's actually more readily going to pass meconium because its guts already working. Okay?
Yeah.
Yeah?
But even for the baby who is not ready to pass meconium, but has passed meconium for some reason, that reason is still not.
Most likely it's still there. So that's what, so once you see meconium thin or thick, there's more likely going to be more coming. That's what I'm trying to say.
Oh, yeah.
Rather than if you see a baby with a completely clear line, but that means it's gut never did work, never opened. Yes, it's been passing clear fluid, but not actual meconium through. So this baby is less likely to pass meconium later, and has not been stressed enough to pass meconium anyway. Yeah. So that's why thin. That's why here we monitor them with continuous monitoring. But why continuous monitoring? Why? Because if we're looking for hypoxia, we can figure out hypoxia by intermittent auscultation. If we're looking for choriamnitis, we
We're
can.
looking for that trend of the baseline rising. We won't get that.
We can. If you're looking for a rising baseline, you can pick it up with intermittent auscultation. You count now 120, in half an hour it's 125, and then 130. That's the whole point of an intermittent auscultation. We're trying to make sure that this is not an acceleration. So the rising baseline you can pick up by intermittent auscultation.
I think that it only takes very less time for the baby to get unwell, so we can't have that window in intermittent auscultation. And baby could get stressed and then we don't pick up on time.
Remember, in intermittent auscultation, you're listening every 15 minutes to every 5 minutes. Yeah. So let's talk about the 15 minutes, the wider gap. You'll probably pick it up over an hour. You're not going to pick that up faster over with continuous monitoring. You're not going to see a rising baseline for 10 minutes and go and act on that. No. Stand. What does that mean?
I mean, a stand event.
Does stand help you with meconium? What does stand look for? Hypoxia. Yeah. Not infection and not choriamnitis. So why am I insistent on continuous monitoring? If I said that I just can pick it up with intermittent auscultation.
Oh, but it's associated hypoxia.
I can pick that up as well with intermittent auscultation.
Don't
What am I looking for? What was the first complication you always said?
Meconium aspiration.
Meconium aspiration. What am I looking for?
Deep deceleration.
Deep, wide decelerations.
Prolonged.
When are those happening?
Because
They're happening during the contraction.
Yeah.
Intermittent auscultation, I am designed to look after the contraction.
Yeah.
So I will pick up the rise in baseline, but I won't pick up the deep, wide decelerations because I am aiming to make sure that I avoid those. That's why we got it wrong when we first started physiology, because we were looking for hypoxia. We were thinking, well, actually, we can monitor this. Baseline has remained stable. Decelerations, who cares about them? But the reality is I am looking for those decelerations this time. Not like any other baby that I'm not bothering about them, who doesn't really, this baby is not hypoxic. This baby is just getting cord compressions. But in this special situation, cord compressions can be harmful. That's why you can't do intermittent auscultation. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Did you see what you've just missed?
Yeah.
Did you understand that? Yeah. Okay. I'm obviously looking for the uncomplicated tachycardia, but I can pick that up with intermittent auscultation. That's not the reason we're on continuous monitoring. Okay. The main aim is for vaginal delivery. That's the situation for all babies, no? But a baby with meconium, I'm actually more focused on getting a vaginal delivery out of. Why? Yes. So that vaginal compression, that chest compression that happens with a vaginal delivery ends up with a third of the volume of the liquor being drained out.
But Tim was checked his work.
Yeah, go ahead.
It wasn't working this morning, it is working now.
It is working
Someone
now.
came and sorted it, plugged it.
So, is anyone tried the one and the third?
No, we have the screen. We've taken the screen off.
You take it. Okay, I see. Perfect.
Yeah. So, sorry, we said that the vaginal delivery, that's chest compression, empties about 1/3 of baby's chest volume, whatever fluid is inside, it empties that. So when baby's taking his first breath, there is more room for air. It's not going to empty all of it, but it empties a lot of it. Okay, cesarean section, you're not going to achieve that. Yeah, please don't press on baby's lungs or baby's chest to try and empty it. It doesn't work. Yeah, but remember, vaginal delivery does not mean vaginal delivery under any cost. Okay, if baby is hypoxic or if it's developing choriamnionitis, it's less likely to be able to cope with any other stress. Does that make sense? Okay. In the very old days, when dinosaurs still used to roam the earth, okay, when I was still training, when the baby's head just popped out, we always used to come in with all suction, start suctioning its mouth. And the moment it comes out, we start putting tubes all the way down its, what we thought was its trachea. Most of the time it was its esophagus, whatever. We're just sucking up whatever we can bring out. Okay, we don't do that anymore. Do you know why? And should we go back and? Not usually. So A, it can be damaging. Okay.
And then making baby down.
Making baby to gag, but I thought that was good. That the baby will throw up whatever it's meconium it's doing. What's the problem with anesthetics when he's putting the tube down if they don't have a very clear view of the larynx or trying several attempts of putting a tube down? The moment you touch the cords, they go into spasm and the baby can't breathe anymore. You've literally just inhibited any respiratory reflexes that this baby has. If you properly aspirate the meconium, you've literally just now stopped this baby breathing for whatever time it gets or has until this resolves. So we don't do that anymore. Okay. Now, the other issue is this baby is now supposed to come out from oxygenation via the placenta to oxygenation via its lungs. But we just said that baby's lungs are a little bit too gunky. They're full of other stuff, and baby has to the time to figure it out. So when you see a baby with meconium, and what I generally tend to do, if I can see thick meconium and a baby's face come out and it's all green, I usually wipe it just from the outside. I don't do much more. I don't go any deeper anymore. Okay. But the other thing is, once baby's delivered, we generally tend to try and delay cord clamping as much as we can. Yes, especially for a baby with meconium. Okay, because this baby now is relying on the placenta for oxygen. If you clamp the placenta, it's supposed to rely on its lungs, which are not working yet. It tries to breathe for the first couple of times, it's not working yet. You've now gone into an acute hypoxia. Okay? So when the baby with meconium is born, the first thing I always do is just feel the cord. What's the baby's heart rate? Because if the baby's heart rate is fine, that baby's getting oxygen from the placenta. Give the baby a few seconds or maybe a minute to cry. If it's obviously not crying and if it's turning blue, clamp the cord, hand it over, let it resuscitate. Okay? But if it starts to cry, give it the whole minute of crying. Let this baby cry for the minute. The idea is that whatever meconium is inside has now moved to a side at least. There's part of the lung that's working, that's supporting the baby to oxygenate. Baby's brain and body is getting some oxygen. It's not uncommon to see a baby that starts off with APGARs of 9, you clamp the cord, 5, 0. Because it has no lungs. It's trying to cry. It's never 100% at the beginning, so it's usually 8, 9. I mean, when we see a baby that's trying to cry, we always give it 2 marks, regardless of what color, what heart rate it actually is. Yes? But the reality is that it's never going to be a 10. It's never an APGARs of 10. They usually have a slightly slower heart rate because they're not fully oxygenated yet. They're trying to cry, they're making the effort, but they're not fully oxygenated yet. The moment you clamp, you now shut off the oxygen completely, and then they crash. So if you can, give them that moment of, let's sort myself out with some oxygen coming, and then clamp the cord. If the baby is hypoxic, if you put your hand on the cord and it's slow, this baby is not getting oxygen neither from the placenta nor from the lungs. Hand this baby over, please. Okay? Yes, meconium is about other things, but obviously the obstruction part and the hypoxia part is still a critical point. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's meconium in a nutshell so far. Does anyone have any questions?